They told you it would never happen. They swore the forbidden door was sealed shut. They promised Jon Moxley was AEW for life. And yet here we are because the Death Rider doesn't ask for permission, he invades. Think about this for 1 second. What if everything you believe about loyalty in wrestling is a lie? What if the man who bled for AEW, carried the company on his back through empty arenas and became the heart of rebellion, is preparing to burn it all down by marching straight into WWE territory? Because that's exactly what this feels like. Not a rumor, not a tease, a declaration of war. Moxley has always been chaos incarnate. He doesn't play corporate games. He doesn't smile for the cameras. And when he goes quiet, that's when you should be most afraid. The Death Rider doesn't knock. He kicks the door off its hinges and dares you to stop him. Ask yourself this: when was the last time Moxley looked truly satisfied in AEW? Was it the endless bloodbaths, the recycled rivalries, or the feeling that the system he once rebelled against is starting to look exactly like the one he escaped? Because history is repeating itself, and Moxley knows it. WWE isn't just a company, it's the empire, the machine, the place that broke Dean Ambrose and forced Jon Moxley to be reborn. So why would he ever go back? Simple. You don't destroy a monster by running from it. You destroy it by walking straight into its lair and daring it to flinch. Picture this for a moment. No music, no warning, a dead silent arena. Then through the crowd that walk, that stare, that cold, violent purpose. Imagine the look on Roman Reigns' face. Seth Rollins freezing in place. The Shield ghosts rising all at once. Quick question: who would you want to see Moxley hit first if he showed up in WWE? Drop it in the comments. This isn't about nostalgia. This is about unfinished business. Moxley doesn't want closure, he wants casualties. WWE thrives on control, branding, and polish. Moxley thrives on anarchy. That clash isn't just money, it's combustible. And here's the part AEW fans don't want to hear. What happens to AEW when its most dangerous weapon turns his back on the battlefield? No Moxley bleeding for the cause. No Moxley dragging young stars into legitimacy. No Moxley standing as the final boss of violence. That absence would be deafening. Another question for you: does AEW feel bigger with Moxley, or is it starting to feel like it's holding him back? If Moxley invades WWE, it's not a return, it's an execution. He wouldn't come back to play the same role. He'd come back to expose everything: creative stagnation, false rebellion, and the illusion of sports entertainment. He'd force WWE to respond, not with promos, but with war. And the scariest part, WWE might actually need him. Because when wrestling gets too safe, too predictable, too comfortable, Moxley is the reset button. So here's the real question: is Jon Moxley abandoning AEW, or is he evolving beyond it? One last thing before you answer that. If the Death Rider truly invades WWE, there will be no winners, only survivors. Would you cheer him or fear him? Let me know in the comments. And ask yourself, are you ready for the war that follows? Because once that war begins, there is no turning back. This isn't a storyline you can wrap up in 3 weeks. This isn't a nostalgia pop or a cheap ratings grab. If Jon Moxley truly walks away from AEW and storms into WWE, it rewrites the power balance of professional wrestling overnight. And deep down, everyone knows it. Think about how WWE would have to react. You don't contain Moxley. You don't script him into a neat little segment and send him to the back. The moment he shows up, the entire locker room shifts. Suddenly, guys who've been coasting feel exposed. Suddenly, safe main events don't feel safe anymore. And let's be honest, who in WWE is actually prepared for him? Roman Reigns? The tribal chief built on dominance and control versus a man who thrives in chaos and pain. Seth Rollins? The architect forced to confront the ghost he helped create. Cody Rhodes? The company man who left to bet on himself, now staring across the ring at a man who bets on violence. Another quick question: which of those matchups would steal the show instantly? Now flip the camera back to AEW. Because Moxley leaving wouldn't just be a roster change, it would be a psychological wound. AEW was built on rebellion, on being the alternative, on telling the world that wrestling didn't need WWE. And no one symbolized that more than Moxley. If he walks, critics will say it first. Even Moxley couldn't stay. Even the Death Rider went back. Was AEW ever truly the revolution? That narrative alone could do more damage than any rating dip. But here's the twist nobody wants to admit. Moxley doesn't owe AEW anything. He gave them blood. He gave them credibility. He gave them his body and his reputation when the company needed a savior. And now, maybe he wants something bigger than being the face of defiance. Maybe he wants to be the storm that proves no company is untouchable. Ask yourself this: is loyalty in wrestling real, or is it just another storyline fans want to believe? Because Moxley has never pretended to be loyal to logos. He's loyal to one thing only: the fight. And WWE represents the ultimate fight. Imagine the promos. Or better yet, imagine the lack of them. Moxley wouldn't need long speeches. A stare down, a mic drop, a single sentence that hits harder than a scripted monologue ever could. The fans would argue endlessly. AEW fans feeling betrayed, WWE fans claiming victory, everyone else glued to their screens because wrestling suddenly feels dangerous again. That's the magic and the menace of the Death Rider. So here's another question for you: would Moxley and WWE make wrestling better or burn everything to the ground? Because either way, you're watching. And maybe that's the point. Moxley doesn't chase approval. He doesn't care about tribalism. He doesn't need to win the internet. His power comes from forcing uncomfortable conversations about creative freedom, about corporate control, about what wrestling is supposed to feel like. Pain, uncertainty, reality. If this invasion happens, WWE won't just be welcoming back a former star. They'd be inviting in a man who exposes the cracks in the system. A man who reminds the world that wrestling isn't meant to be polished, it's meant to be felt. And AEW? They'd be forced to answer the hardest question of all. Can the revolution survive without its most violent soldier? So before you scroll away, before you pick a side, before you argue in someone else's comments, answer this for yourself. If the Death Rider rides again, whose house does he really burn down first? Drop your thoughts below. Share this with someone who thinks this could never happen. And remember, wars don't start with explosions. They start with footsteps, walking straight through the crowd. And those footsteps? They don't echo with hesitation. They echo with intent. Because Jon Moxley doesn't invade to make friends. He invades to expose truths people are too comfortable to confront. The moment he steps into WWE, every storyline, every championship reign, every so-called top guy gets put under a brutal spotlight. Ask yourself this: how many WWE superstars have actually been tested the way Moxley has? Not in perfectly produced main events, not with safety nets, but in wars where reputations are shattered and legacies are forged in blood and grit. That's where Moxley lives. And here's what should really make people angry. WWE fans would cheer him. AEW fans would still cheer him. Because chaos doesn't need permission. Imagine the locker room tension. Veterans wondering if the system they helped build is about to turn on them. Young stars realizing that the bar has just been raised to a level they may not be ready for. Management scrambling not to control him, but to survive him. Quick one: do you think WWE would try to tame Moxley, or would they unleash him? Because that decision alone determines everything. If they cage him, the rebellion grows louder. If they unleash him, the product changes overnight. And then there's the elephant in the room no one wants to touch. What if this isn't about WWE or AEW at all? What if Moxley is declaring war on the entire industry, on predictability, on comfort, on the idea that wrestlers should fit neatly into boxes labeled sports entertainment or alternative? Because wherever Moxley goes, the ground cracks. AEW without Moxley would be forced to evolve or collapse under its own expectations. WWE with Moxley would be forced to remember what danger feels like. Either way, wrestling wins, and that's the most infuriating part for people who just want to pick a side. Another question: are fans more loyal to companies, or to wrestlers who make them feel something real? Think back to the last time wrestling genuinely shocked you. Not surprised you, shocked you. Chances are, Moxley was somewhere near that moment. And that's why this possible invasion matters. Not because of contracts, not because of ratings, but because it reminds everyone that wrestling is at its best when it's unpredictable, uncomfortable, and just a little bit out of control. So if the Death Rider truly abandons AEW and rides into WWE, understand this clearly. This won't be a return. This won't be a cameo. This will be a statement. A statement that says no throne is safe, no empire is eternal, and no company owns rebellion. Final question before this war erupts: when Moxley stands in a WWE ring again, will you see a traitor, or the most honest man in wrestling? Sound off in the comments. Share this with someone who swears this could never happen. Because the most dangerous invasions are the ones nobody believes. Until it's already too late. And make no mistake, too late is exactly what this would feel like. Because by the time Moxley sets foot in a WWE arena, the impact isn't just physical, it's psychological. He doesn't just fight opponents, he fights perception, expectation, and comfort. Every fan who thinks they know what wrestling is, every executive who thinks they control the narrative, will be proven wrong. Think about the promos, the backstage segments, the fans losing their minds because the man who defined AEW's edge is now rewriting WWE's rules. And this isn't about trash talk or flashy entrances, this is about fear, respect, and chaos in its purest form. And let's get real: which superstar would survive the first match against Moxley without being completely exposed? Drop your answer in the comments. I'm curious who you think could even stand toe-to-toe with the Death Rider. Because in this war, there are no safe bets, no scripted outcomes that matter, no alliances that can fully protect you. WWE has built its empire on control, but Moxley doesn't respect control, he destroys it. And when the first table breaks, the first chair swings, and the first confrontation turns into blood-soaked chaos, people will remember why wrestling ever needed a man like him. Here's the kicker: AEW can spin all the narratives it wants. They can hype the next champ, or build up the next big feud. But nothing replaces the void of Jon Moxley. The man who carried locker rooms, inspired fans, and reminded the world that wrestling is more than scripted smiles, is gone. And if he walks into WWE, that void becomes glaringly obvious. Another thought for you: do you think AEW can survive Moxley leaving without losing credibility, or is he too integral to their identity? I want your hot takes in the comments. Now, imagine the first live event where he appears. The arena goes silent for a second, then the crowd erupts. The commentators scramble to explain. The wrestlers on the roster suddenly realize the rules have changed. Every feud, every title, every storyline suddenly feels smaller compared to the storm walking down the aisle. And Moxley thrives in moments like that. The tension, the uncertainty, the raw emotion. Because for him, wrestling isn't entertainment, it's war. And in war, hesitation is fatal. So ask yourself this: the moment Moxley steps into WWE, who wins, who loses, and who just survives the chaos? Comment below, let's get a debate going. This invasion isn't just about two companies. It's about the very nature of wrestling itself. It's about loyalty versus freedom. It's about comfort versus anarchy. It's about who has the courage to step into the fire, and who will get burned by it. And if you think Moxley is doing this for fame or money, think again. He's doing it because wrestling needs to feel alive again. Because fans need to feel danger, unpredictability, and truth again. And because somewhere inside, he knows that no one else will do it the way he can. So here's the ultimate question to leave you with: when the Death Rider invades WWE, will the industry change forever, or will he just remind everyone how fragile it really is? Drop your answer. Share this video with every wrestling fan you know. And buckle up, because if Moxley is coming, nothing will ever feel safe again.